Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Nuceria. This dead world, probably a former part of the Ultramar Empire, was once home to a Primarch much like the world itself in nature. Brutal. This Primarch was the only one known to join the Great Crusade unwillingly, having refused the Emperor on their reunion, and he and his legion caused red ruin during the Crusade and Horus Heresy. They were among the first to swear allegiance to War Master Horus, almost entirely falling into Chaos's thrall. They were the primary allies of the Word-Bearers in the Heresy, and their Primarch was granted demonhood even before the Battle of Terra. The Legion now is shattered into warbands, mainly due to the actions of one of its own captains following its abandonment by its Gene Father, and today its ranks are naught but berserkers sworn to Khorne the Blood God. They were the 12th Legion Astartes, led by the Primarch Angron, also known as the Red Angel. They were the World Eaters. This is their tale, from their birth to their shattering. My name is Michael for Tactica Imperialis, and welcome to Legions, a 40k Stories mini-series. The 12th Legion were formed during the Unification Wars from the gene seed of the Primarch Angron. They saw a small amount of action during the conquering of Terra, possibly in what used to be known as South Africa, but were then absent from the front when the Sol system was brought into compliance. The reasons for this are unknown, with suggestions varying from keeping a reserve in case rapid redeployment was needed to putting down any disloyalty among the Imperial forces. The recruits into the 12th were not drawn based on geography, and there was perhaps no pattern to them at all, but it was noted that often the more aggressive candidates would be the ones selected. They were a dedicated bunch, and were already renowned for tenacity and close assault even in this early stage, which is supposedly why they were named the War Hounds by the Emperor. Their command structure was based solely on battlefield prowess, specifically in matters up close and personal, and it would become commonplace for deadly duels for rank to take place between officers and subordinates. You won, or you died. The 12th were perhaps the least merciful to their opponents as well as to their own. The nearest thing to mercy they knew was swift execution. Cowards on both sides were butchered, and failure/surrender was never even considered. Their first recorded combat as a legion came against the asteroid prison colony known as Cerberus, in what is the only known Thunder Warrior vs Astartes conflict. And whilst the Legion emerged victorious from the 5-hour conflict, they suffered horrendous casualties in the fight against what were in essence their predecessors. They were then split into smaller formations of a few thousand Astartes each, supposedly to provide a powerful and deadly reserve force, though the War Hounds still saw much frontline action, notably alongside the Iron Warriors and the Space Wolves. Their largest force, of around 8,000, formed the 13th Expeditionary Fleet, and they would use the world of Bod as a muster world that would become their home after the reunion with Angron. The sheer ferocity of this group was legendary, leading to the fleet becoming known as the Bloody 13th, used by the War Council as a murderous sledgehammer should it be required. Their attached support forces also had some of the tendencies of the War Hounds, so this theory is not unsubstantiated. In all fairness, the entire War Hounds Legion was seen in this way to some extent, based on their actions throughout the Crusade. Such an opinion was widespread due to their splintered deployment. Damning rumours, both validated and otherwise, spread like wildfire. Whether the War Hounds knew or cared is unknown, but they seemed to avoid other Imperials when not on the battlefield. Eventually, the Great Crusade reached Nuceria and rediscovered Angron, the 17th Primarch to be found. I don't know why it took so much longer to find Angron than Guilliman, given both were probably in or around Ultramar, but hey, there you go. Angron, originally known as Angronius, Lord of the Red Sands. Yes, that is rather like a name from ancient Rome, it comes up a fair bit with these guys. Landed in the icy mountains of Nuceria, and seemingly came out of his gestation pod swinging. When he was found by a slaver, there were many alien corpses strewn around the nascent Primarch, which were later theorized to be Eldar trying to prevent what they knew was to come if Angron lived. Such a shame they failed, for all concerned. Angron was brought back to the Nucerian capital Deschia after being healed, but was then implanted with the butcher's nails and thrown into the gladiatorial pits. What the butcher's nails are is not exactly known, but they were described by Archon Land to the Emperor as archaeotech known as a cruciamen. They heightened aggression and removed the ability to take pleasure from any emotion save rage, and had in fact replaced part of Angron's brain as their tendrils removed them. Whilst he was a gladiator, Angron was a firm favourite with the crowd for his martial skill, never losing in battle. He tried and failed to leave a slave revolt on numerous occasions, but eventually he was able to lead an army out of the arenas and into the mountains. This force, known as the Eaters of Cities, fought well, but were ultimately doomed due to lack of numbers and arms. It took several years and many bloody battles, but at last Angron and co were encircled by 7 Usarian armies, at which point the Emperor arrived. He had watched the revolt for some time, and was quietly impressed with his creation for his success, and he travelled to the Eaters of Cities camp along with a few custodes. He promised Angron glory, armies to lead in his image, and a chance to become the perfect warrior. But the Red Angel did the unthinkable, and refused, choosing to die with his friends and allies against the Usarian forces. The Emperor withdrew to his flagship, but refused to let his son die, teleporting Angron out just before the battle was about to begin. Angron was seemingly able to watch as his friends were massacred by the Usarians, but other reports may say something different, and he was then transferred to the War Hounds fleet. Various Legion Masters were sent in descending order of rank, trying to bring the Red Angel into the Great Crusade. Angron killed them all, without challenge, as they had been told by the Emperor not to fight back, until the 8th Assault Company's captain, Khorne, was able to bond in some way with the Primarch. Convinced to a degree by the words of Khorne, Angron was brought before his sons, at which time the Legion took their new name. Khorne made reference to Angron's former army being the Eaters of Cities, to which someone replied that under the Primarch's guidance, the War Hounds would become the Eaters of Worlds. Angron seemed to take the name to heart, and it became the new name for the 12th, the World Eaters. The first action for Angron after taking command of the World Eaters was an assessment of his forces held on their home world of Bod. He initiated a gladiatorial overhaul of the recruitment and training process, taking the already harsh programs and making them downright lethal. By the time they joined the Great Crusade again as the 203rd Expeditionary Fleet, the World Eaters were in part the image of the Eaters of Cities, all Terran ideas erased in favour of the Usarian gladiator way. Pit fighting was even implemented and sanctioned by the Red Angel as a method of controlling the violence away from the battlefield. One of the main reasons for this heightened aggression came from Angron himself. He had ordered the Legion's apothecaries to replicate the butcher's nails, allowing them to be implanted into other Astartes. These new nails were nothing compared to the original copy in the Primarch, but the psychosurgery was still a success in terms of their effects, and even avoided the negative aspects that would have become relevant later. Of course, the violent methods used by the World Eaters in and out of combat meant that the attrition rate was pretty damn high, and so Angron both recruited from conquered worlds and streamlined the process of creating Astartes, even resorting to donating his own genetic material. All of this, in combination with the attitudes already established by the War Hounds, made the World Eaters a Terra tool arguably as effective as the Night Lords in their own way. The 12th were known and feared as butchers all, and if a word fell from the compliance, then the mention of the World Eaters coming would put them straight. If they were too slow, then I pity the populace for the short time that they would have left to live, for a world attacked by the 12th was often slaughtered without thought. The slaughters were not always total, since recruitment was obviously done too, but genocides did happen, such as the Genna massacre, where the entire population was murdered in just one night. This reputation even permeated into the other Legion Astartes, who began to shun the World Eaters, and one event in particular showcases this, the cleansing of Aragata. Ordered by Horus to only kill the leaders of the final citadel, the World Eaters instead slaughtered everyone after suffering huge losses on the way in, and in the aftermath, Robert Gilliman of the Ultramarines was known to have protested. I doubt Angron cared, to be honest. The first known attempt to counter this came in the Night of the Wolf, where Leman Russ came to a world unknown to confront Angron, under orders, of course. The two forces and Primarchs clashed in what was probably the first Astartes v Astartes conflict in history, but Russ was not aiming to kill the Red Angel. Instead, the Wolf King hoped to show Angron the error of his ways through outwitting him in combat, and so held back in their duel as the legionary battle tipped toward the sons of Fenris. More wolves died, but the tide of the battle was with them. Angron defeated Russ in the duel, but found himself surrounded by the wolves who could have killed him with a word from their father. But Russ withdrew, hoping his point was made. Whilst others, including Lorgar, saw that Angron had lost, the Red Angel was convinced of his own victory, and so just carried on as he was. Eventually, the Emperor tried to intervene personally, and commanded Angron to stop the psychosurgery of the new Butcher's Nails, but the Primarch refused. Honestly, given he's probably still had a big issue with the Emperor after New Seria, this is hardly surprising. The World Eaters were exiled to the north to fight Xenos as opposed to humans. Yes, Emperor, send away the World Eaters, that'll stop them continuing their practices now that they're further from observation. Their actions in that region are poorly documented, but when the Emperor recalled them and tried one last time to save Angron and his sons from themselves, he made a near-fatal error. The mentor and overseer he sent was Horus Lupercal. It is not known exactly when Angron and Horus first worked together in relation to the corruption of the War Master on Davin, i.e. which happened first. It is believed that Horus's fall came first, as the time the Primarchs are first documented working together came during the Oresian Technocracy War, by which time Horus was in the thrall of chaos. This was an unjust war triggered by the murder of an ambassador, supposedly by Horus himself, and was used by the War Master to win the support of the Mechanicum and identify the Loyalist elements of his legion. The World Eaters, as usual, were involved in some of the bloodiest battles of the 10-month war, which also involved a contingent of Emperor's children. Easily won over by the War Master due to his bitter hatred of the Emperor, though he did not consider himself allied with the arch-traitor, but instead simply against his father, Angron was part of Horus's war council when the time came for the betrayal to be revealed on Istvan III. Just like the other Primarchs, Angron sent down his loyalist element, led by the captain Erlen. It is not stated how this decision was reached. It wasn't just the Terrans, as the Death World of Shabran Dar was sent, so I'm interested to know the logic Angron used. When the virus bombing was concluded, it became apparent that many Loyalists yet lived, and in a rage, Angron decided that his legion's forces would die by his own hand, launching a ground invasion that infuriated Horus and cost the traitors dearly as they reinforced. Possibly having to be dragged away by Mortarion and Fulgrim to conserve their forces, Angron and co. were heavily involved in the Drop Site massacre, cutting off the Raven Guard from the Iron Hands and running down Korax's sons for months after the battle, until the Raven Lord and his sons were miraculously relieved. With the Heresy now underway, the World Eaters were almost entirely committed to the Shadow Crusade on Lorgar's request, driving into Ultramar alongside the forces of the Wordbearers. Whilst the Arisen and the Red Angel were initially distrustful and borderline hostile to one another, especially as Angron insisted on smashing random worlds instead of pursuing the joint objective of Armatura, the two eventually came to some union after fighting off Dark Eldar attempting to assassinate Angron. Again. The Shadow Crusade would go on to cause ruin just as Lorgar planned, and whilst many worlds were crushed, the final defining battle came when Lorgar suggested a return to New Seria, saying it would offer some potential closure to Angron, and would allow the 17th Primarch to save the Red Angel. The Butcher's Nails that were partially bonded with Angron's brain were slowly killing him, and Lorgar had devised a plan to help his brother, and so he took Angron home. When he discovered the bodies of the Eaters of Cities, massacred by the slave lords and left where they fell to rot in the open air, Angron simply ordered the traitors to massacre everyone on New Seria. Saving Lorgar from certain death by holding up a Warhound Titan's foot with his bare hands like a flippin' superhero, Angron then intervened in the duel between the Arisen and Robu Guilliman as the Ultramarines finally caught up with the Shadow Crusade, who'd been chasing since Calth. The Lord of Ultramar and Angron had a heated verbal fight along the way, and Guilliman was eventually driven back, giving Lorgar his chance to complete his secondary mission. He began a ritual of Khorne, using Angron's rage as a conduit, and the Red Angel underwent a dark apotheosis to become a demon Primarch of the Blood God. I believe the third Primarch to go to demonhood after Magnus and Fulgrim. With that, the Ultramarines withdrew, and the Shadow Crusade came to an end as the traitors headed for Terra, the ruined storm now complete. Angron himself was only present on Istvan and during the Shadow Crusade before Terra, but the World Eaters were involved in other battles if they were not with their Primarch, such as the Battle of Yarant. The most famous battle of the 12th in the Heresy to not involve the Red Angel was in fact a crushing defeat. Their home world of Bod came under attack from shattered legionaries, led by the Iron Hands under Ortek Moore. The Loyalists launched a ground invasion, but their main move was to bombard the world's moon and knock it out of orbit, sending it onto a collision course with Bod itself. Once they had their prize, a gene casket of unknown purpose, Moore's forces withdrew and Bod was destroyed, along with its biovats being used to keep the numbers of World Eaters topped up. During the Battle of Terra, Angron and the World Eaters were on the front line, as one would expect. Angron was the one to offer Horus's terms of surrender to the Blood Angel's Primarch Sanguinius, which of course was refused, and with that, the siege of the Imperial Palace began. It is believed that the World Eaters were the first to breach the walls of the palace, but which wall that applies to is unclear, as the Iron Warriors were seemingly just as instrumental. The 12th did take the Eternity Wall spaceport, but the first of the actual palace gates may well have been the work of Perturabo. Some say Angron was the first through said breach, whilst others give the honour to his equerry Khorne, but beyond that, we do not know exactly how the World Eaters fared as the siege ground on. It is of course known that they were unsuccessful in the end, and they were pushed back following the death of Horus at the hands of the Emperor. In the aftermath, the Legion entered the Eye of Terror alongside the other traitors, supposedly trying to take the demon world Scalathrax as their new home. They had now been abandoned by Angron, who no longer cared for his sons just as he likely hadn't when they first met, and so the 12th was seemingly led by Khorne, but this state of affairs would not last for long. It is unknown exactly at what time the Legion fell totally under Khorne's sway, though it was presumably during the Shadow Crusade or at Istvan, but by the time of Scalathrax, Khorne was now one of the Blood God's champions. The problem with Scalathrax was that the Emperor's children wanted it too, for some reason, and so the sons of Fulgrim and Angron came to blows. The nights on the demon world were too cold even for traitor Astartes to survive in, and so both sets of forces were forced into shelter, but they would not be given respite as Khorne butchered them all, shattering the World Eaters' Legion into smaller warbands. The remnants of the 12th have been responsible for many bloodstained battles in Khorne's name over the millennia, but the only time the Legion is known to have even partially reunited came in the First War on Armageddon, when Angron returned to the physical realm and was only stopped by an entire brotherhood of Grey Knights, the equivalent to a company. They are now more commonly known as Khorne berserkers, who fight with the chain axes that were associated with the Legion even before the coming of Angron. The Red Angel in fact wielded 2 chain axes as his weapons of choice whilst he was human, though he has abandoned both of said weapons in favour of his demonic black blade. They have seemingly found a way to continue implanting the crude equivalents to the butcher's nails that Angron had been implanting in the Great Crusade. Such a shame that knowledge didn't die with Bod, which has allowed non-World Eaters to join the ranks of the berserkers too. Possession is also relatively commonplace as it is seen as a sign of favour from the Blood God. And so, with the tale of the 12th Legion told, let us now look at a few famous World Eaters. The 8th Assault Captain Khorne was the equerry to Angron, serving as his advisor and voice of reason. Well, as reasonable as someone implanted with the butcher's nails can be anyway. Terran-born and Bod-trained, Khorne was the one to talk down the Red Angel and bring him into the Great Crusade, and the captain would go on to distinguish himself both on and off the battlefield. He was renowned as a warrior, despite his unstable edge like all World Eaters that even gave Nathaniel Garrow pause, and struck up a close friendship with many other legionaries including Garviel Loken, Sigismund of the Imperial Fists, and Argel Tal of the Word-Bearers. These relations with many Loyalists didn't stop Khorne from turning traitor at Istvan III, and he was believed to have died after being impaled on a dozer blade fighting Loken, but somehow survived. During the Shadow Crusade, Khorne actually inherited the chain axe Gorechild, the smaller of Angron's two weapons, after the axe was broken during the battle on Armatura. Angron was buried in rubble by a demolition act carried out by the Ultramarines, and whilst he dug his way out with the aid of his Librarius, Khorne was in command of the Legion. In the aftermath, the Equerry would seek out the discarded chain axe which his Primarch had been forced to use to get out from the rubble, and ordered it repaired despite the gladiatorial traditions that dictated that lost or discarded weapons would bring ill luck. This tradition has been violated again over the millennia, as World Eaters today are known to use and fight over Angron's other chain axe, Gorefather, after the Red Angel abandoned it on his ascension to demonhood. The reborn Gorechild has since taken innumerable heads in Khorne's hands, and it nearly took that of Erebus after the chaplains slew Argel Tal in the battle for New Seria. The leader of the Galvorbak and Khorne were fast friends and sword brothers. Erebus's excuse was that Tal's ability to calm the World Eater down would prevent Khorne from embracing his destiny, a destiny perhaps indicated to again when Khorne travelled to Prospero some time before the Shadow Crusade. The 8th captain, he was never promoted from the 8th for some reason, I really don't know why, was offered a chance to be at least partially healed by the Thousand Sun captain Caliston, after the Psycho read Khorne's mind and learned of both his intense suffering and his hidden goal of finding devices on Prospero to heal him. This was after the scouring, and so said devices were broken, which is why Caliston had to offer his services. Khorne refused, saying he was in fact beyond saving as his now legendary rage descended, and as he died to the World Eater, Caliston reflected on the blood-soaked path that now lay before Khorne in Khorne's service. Khorne fought on Terra and was supposedly the first through the breach in the gates, though other records give this honour to Angron, but he did not survive. He died at the walls of the Imperial Palace and was recovered by his brothers, and was then resurrected seemingly by the power of Khorne as the remaining captains fought for command. Either that, or he never quite died. The blood spilt on his body apparently during the duels, and that was the catalyst for resurrection. Originally nicknamed the Bloody during the Crusade and the Heresy, he gained his epithet the Betrayer after Scalathrax. Taking up a flamer in a rage as both the World Eaters and Emperor's children retreated from the cold of the demon world, he burned out every hiding hole he could find and slaughtered everyone he found, no matter which legion they belonged to. This flamer is still in circulation today. I believe it's known as the Burning Brand of Scalathrax. Khorne now stands as the mortal champion of Khorne, and the number of skulls he has claimed is so large and uncountable that there is supposedly a pile next to Khorne's throne just dedicated to his kills, which is blooming impressive. The Captain Draeger was first entered into the history books when Angron was integrated into the War Hounds Legion. It was he who coined the phrase Eaters of Worlds when the Red Angel was introduced by Khorne, and of course this would be adopted as the Legion's name for the rest of time. Draeger had tried to talk Khorne out of going to see Angron, just because the command structure was being murdered by their Primarch, and he seemed to believe that Khorne would be best suited to lead the Legion if things with Angron went south. Funny how that came to pass anyway, if only for a short time. Following Angron's return, however, Draeger went quiet in terms of notoriety, but was presumably implanted with the false butcher's nails like almost everyone else. The only ones confirmed not to have been implanted, aside from a few rare individuals, were the small number of librarians, who were unable to receive the implantations without dying horribly, and so eventually refused them in order to keep fighting. Draeger fought on Armatura in some capacity, implying that he will have been present on Istvan as well, as the Shadow Crusade came soon after that, but his role in all these conflicts is totally unknown, unfortunately. He then made it to Terra and survived the battle in the Cradle of Humanity, linking up with others from his 9th Company and that of the 12th Company during the retreat of the traitors. Draeger put his faith in Khorne to lead and unify the Legion, and put his effort into waking him, despite the seemingly massive gulf in mindsets between them. Khorne was pretty much blessed by Khorne at this time, seemingly known as Karanath within the Legion for reasons unknown, but Draeger was seemingly apathetic to the Blood God and to worship in general. Lorgar and co must not have liked him during the Shadow Crusade, assuming they came across him. Draeger even went so far as to maintain the old colours of white and blue on his armour, despite the growing trend of red and brass that is now synonymous with the Khorne berserkers and World Eaters. Following the awakening of Khorne, Driga urged the 8th captain to lead the still unified Legion, but it appears as though no decision had been made when the incident at Scalathrax took place. The 8th and 9th captains were part of the parley with the Emperor's children, at which point Khorne asked his brother if he wished for the 12th to be unified, which Driga confirmed. Working in tandem, the pair antagonized then killed one of the Emperor's children, with Khorne in the role of antagonist and Driga as executioner. Their justification? Nothing unifies like a war. What became of Captain Driga is unknown, as he dropped out of history from this point on, so I assume either the Emperor's children killed him, or he was caught up in the splintering of the 12th. Maybe his much revered brother Khorne took his skull with Gorechild, which given his distaste for Khorne, would possibly be rather apt. Mesa Varen was a slightly different breed of World Eater. He was, like almost all of the 12th Legion, aggressive and skilled in melee, but he had an honourable streak about him that was seemingly much rarer, at least to external observers. Varen's origins are unknown, which is perhaps unsurprising as the World Eaters recruited from all over the place, but his prowess in combat had seen him rise to the position of captain of the 12th Company by the time of Istvan III. When the Grand Betrayal took place, Mesa Varen held true to his oaths of loyalty to the Emperor, but this was seemingly a surprise to Angron as he was not part of the force sent down to die. In response to this betrayal, ironic I know, Angron sent his personal guard, the Terminator-armoured Devourers, to kill Varen and his men. The Devourers were perhaps unique in that they were functionally useless, as Angron didn't care about them and would go off on rampages without them, and Varen's company were able to see them off, though not without suffering heavy losses. This should perhaps be of less surprise than usual, as the best World Eaters could beat a Devourer 1v1, and the Terminators were probably massively outnumbered. Varen then commandeered the frigate the Dagger Line and fled just as Nathaniel Garrow did on the Eisenstein, though he did not do it alone, as Emperor's children, possibly led by Captain Ricatio, joined them. It's probably Ricatio actually, not sure. The Dagger Line made her way to the Sol system, seemingly picking up some white scars along the way to form a fleet, and was then investigated by Garrow, Tylos Rubio, and a group of Custodes. The fact that Garrow had got there, gone to get Rubio and come back again, is rather shocking, but then, the warp. Whilst it appeared the warriors of the 3rd Legion were the traitors on paper, it was revealed to be the sons of Jagtai Khan who were the betrayers. The timing of this event is unknown, so this could have been an independent fall, or warriors who fled the Second Battle of Prospero, if there were any. The Custodes and Emperor's children were killed, somehow, along with the rest of Varen's company. The 12th did survive within the traitorous Legion, as we mentioned them earlier with Driga. These will be the Loyalist contingent. And once the refugee fleet was destroyed, Varen signed up to Garrow's Knights Errant. The former World Eater joined Garrow and Rubio for the return to Istvan III, hoping to recruit Garviel Loken. It was in fact Varen who convinced Garrow to spare Loken, as the Death Guard believed the Lunar Wolf to be beyond saving due to his madness. He then joined the infiltration of the Vengeful Spirit along with the other Knights Errant, and was wounded in the initial skirmish, seemingly patched up by the White Scar Alton High, as he was the only apothecary known to be a knight. During the final battle in Horus's court, triggered after Loken refused to rejoin the Sons of Horus, Varen intervened to stop Horus Aximand from doing some serious damage to Loken, but lost his arm in the process. He escaped along with many knights, but was forced to be placed into a healing coma and was not heard from again. Given he was in a healing coma, I assume he would recover from his injuries in due course. Either that, or he's taking even longer to recover than Guilliman. Yes, I do know about that. I wasn't aware when we got to Ultramar. Like many of the Knights Errant, though, we have no idea what became of him. We know he wanted to become a Grey Knight, as he was not a Psyker, Butcher's Nails plus Psyker equals dead, as we mentioned earlier. So unfortunately, I cannot discern the fate of Mesa Varen. As with the White Scars previously, I cannot find any more World Eaters with a full enough story to tell, so I'm going to do another Miscellaneous section to cover a fair few of them. 3 World Eaters were members of the Crusader host, a group made up of members from every legion that had a seemingly unknown purpose and that were imprisoned by Rogel Dawn when word of the Heresy reached Terra. 2 of them actually lacked the Butcher's Nails, the twins Suba and Asuba, who joined their implanted brother Tagore in the escape of what would become known as the Outcast Dead. Whilst we do not know on which side of the rebellion this group fell, I would suspect they would be Loyalist, as their number included Severian, a lunar wolf who would become a knight-errant and founder of the Grey Knights. Other loyalists of the 12th include the centurion Kauragar, who managed to land a wound on Angron on Istvan III, which impressed the Primarch greatly, and the captain Skral, who fought and died against word-bearers after joining an ultramarine force investigating the supposed destruction of their flagship after Calth. We know better, it was lost in the warp. On the traitorous side, a few notable individuals would be including Kargos, an apothecary and member of the Khan's command squad who was able to calm the rage of his brothers through humour and wit, traits almost unheard of among world eaters. Sticking with the 8th Company, their standard bearer Jedek was one of the first to receive the Butcher's Nails, but he was killed on Nuceria by the Sons of Guilliman. Delvarus, a centurion and head of the 44th Company, led the Triarii, a unique world eater grouping. Named after elite spearmen from ancient Rome, I did say earlier they were Roman links, didn't I? This group were 5 companies strong and were the boarding specialists of the 12th Legion. The final world eater we shall discuss was not famous during the Heresy, but he was most certainly a traitor. Leovine Euchris was centurion in the 50th Heavy Support Company, and so probably saw less close combat on the battlefield than his brothers, despite obviously being a skilled melee fighter. Remember that to rise through the ranks, you fought for that promotion hand to hand. He survived Terra and Scalathrax, somehow, and led a warband that joined up with Falcus Kyber of the Sons of Horus. That name may be familiar to some, as well it should be, for Kyber was the one who, along with Euchris and the thousand-son Iskandar Kaon, sought out the vengeful spirits and Abaddon in order to save the 16th Legion. Euchris joined Abaddon in the battle against clone horrors at Harmony, and whilst his warband the 15 Fangs was massacred by the false Primarch, the Centurion lived. It is assumed he joined the Black Legion, but it is unconfirmed, and he could just as easily remained a World Eater. So end the tales of the World Eaters Legion. A brutal force even without their Primarch, the Sons of Angron were terrifying to face and near impossible to withstand on campaign. Whilst the 12th Legion no longer exists as a cohesive whole, mainly due to its own commander after Angron abandoned it, the various World Eater and Khorne berserker warbands are still forces to be reckoned with. Now fully in the service of Khorne and forcing the Butcher's Nails onto all who join them, the sheer number of skulls claimed by them for the Blood God must truly be beyond counting. I hope you enjoyed the 7th part of Legions, our 40k Stories miniseries. Next time, I think I've come up with a perfect segue between this Legion and the next one. Time to leave Nuceria and head for a world possibly more deadly than it is. Cretacia. So yeah, spoiler alert. Thank you all for watching. My name is Michael for Tactica Imperialis, and I'll see you all again. Goodbye.